I thought we had forever. 7 years of marriage, a house in the suburbs of Denver, 2 Labrador retrievers named Max and Bella, and plans to start a family. I trusted Diane with everything I had, every piece of my heart, every dream for our future. But when I came home from that business trip 3 days early, the silence in our house told me a story I never wanted to hear. Her closet was empty. Her jewelry box was gone. And on the kitchen counter sat a handwritten letter that would shatter my world into a million pieces. She had vanished to Spain with a man I barely knew existed. Before we dive into how karma completely obliterated the perfect life she thought she was running toward, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from right now. And if you have ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you trusted completely, go ahead and hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe because what happened next proves that sometimes the universe has a better sense of justice than we ever could. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began. Diane and I met 9 years ago at a volunteer event at the local hospital in Denver, Colorado. She was a nurse with the kindest smile I had ever seen, always putting others first, always making everyone around her feel valued. I was a construction engineer, fresh off a major project, looking for ways to give back to the community. We connected instantly over our shared love for helping people and spending time outdoors. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Within a year and a half, I proposed on top of Pikes Peak during a sunset hike. Our wedding was small, but perfect. Just close friends and family in a garden ceremony, followed by a reception where we danced until midnight. Diane wore a simple white dress that made her look like she belonged in a fairy tale, and when she said her vows, tears streamed down her face as she promised to love me through every season of life. I believed every single word. I had absolutely no reason not to. The first 7 years were everything I had ever hoped marriage could be. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of Denver, with a backyard big enough for the dogs to run wild. Max and Bella became our world before we had kids. Every weekend, Diane and I would cook together. She loved making homemade pasta from scratch, while I handled the sauces and garlic bread. We would open a bottle of wine, put on some old jazz records, and just talk for hours about everything and nothing. Life felt complete. We both worked hard. Diane took on extra shifts at the hospital because she genuinely loved her patients. I traveled occasionally for construction projects, sometimes gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, but we always stayed connected. She would send me photos of the dogs doing silly things or text me goodnight messages that made me smile, even when I was exhausted in some hotel room hundreds of miles away. We were saving up for a bigger house, one where we could raise the children we planned to have within the next year. Everything was falling into place exactly as it should. Then, about 8 months before everything collapsed, the hospital where Diane worked launched an international medical exchange program. They brought in doctors and nurses from different countries to share knowledge and techniques. One of those professionals was a cardiologist from Barcelona named Ricardo. He was in his late 30s, charming in that European way, with slicked-back dark hair and an accent that made everything sound more sophisticated than it probably was. Diane was assigned to help him adjust to the American healthcare system and get familiar with hospital protocols. I met Ricardo exactly once at a holiday party the hospital threw for staff and their families. He shook my hand, firmly complimented the Colorado weather compared to the humidity in Spain, and talked passionately about cardiac surgery innovations. He seemed professional, dedicated to his work, maybe a little too confident, but nothing set off any alarm bells in my head. Diane talked about him, occasionally mentioned how driven he was, how different the medical culture was in Spain. It all seemed innocent. I trusted my wife. Why would I not? Ricardo stayed for 3 months, then returned to Barcelona. That should have been the end of it. But about 5 months before Diane disappeared, I started noticing changes. Small things at first. She became attached to her phone in a way she had never been before. She would take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, even when she went outside to water the plants. If I walked into a room while she was texting, she would quickly turn the screen away or lock it with a nervous laugh. Then came the Spanish lessons. One evening I came home to find her listening to a language learning app repeating phrases in Spanish. When I asked about it, she said she wanted to expand her skill set, maybe work with more diverse patient populations. It sounded reasonable. Diane was always trying to improve herself. But something about the way she said it felt off, like she was reading from a script she had rehearsed. Our intimacy disappeared. She would claim exhaustion after every shift, turning away from me in bed, building an invisible wall between us that grew thicker each week. When I tried to plan a weekend getaway to reconnect, she found excuses. Too much work, too tired, maybe next month. Next month never came. I started feeling like a roommate in my own marriage, and the loneliness was suffocating. I blamed myself. Maybe I had been traveling too much. Maybe I was not attentive enough. Maybe I had taken her for granted without realizing it. I tried everything I could think of to fix whatever was broken. I cooked her favorite meals, left love notes on the bathroom mirror, suggested couples activities we used to enjoy. Nothing worked. She was physically present, but emotionally gone, and I had no idea where she went. The night everything started to crack open, I was in the garage fixing a broken shelf when I heard her voice drifting through the open window. She was in the backyard speaking Spanish on the phone. Her voice had a lightness I had not heard in months, a girlish giggle that made her sound like someone I did not recognize. The words were clumsy and mispronounced, but the affection in her tone was unmistakable. When I walked outside, she jumped, like I had caught her doing something wrong. She quickly ended the call and said it was just a coworker from Spain, someone asking about American medical procedures. The lie was so obvious it hurt. That night I could not sleep. I lay next to her in bed, listening to her breathe, wondering who she had become and when I had lost her. The woman I married would never hide things from me. The woman I married would have talked to me if something was wrong. But that woman was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing her face. 2 weeks after the phone call incident, Diane left her iPad at home when she rushed out for an early shift. She had been so careful with her phone, never letting it out of her sight, but the iPad sat on the kitchen counter still unlocked. I stared at it for 10 minutes, wrestling with myself. Looking through her devices felt like a violation of trust, a line I had never crossed in 7 years of marriage. But the nagging feeling in my gut would not go away. Something was deeply wrong, and I needed to know what it was. I opened the iPad with shaking hands. The password was still our wedding date. That detail made everything hurt even more. I went straight to her messages and found WhatsApp. There at the top of her conversations was Ricardo. Hundreds of messages stretching back 4 months. I started scrolling, and each message drove the knife deeper into my chest. They were in love. Not just flirting, not just an emotional affair. They were planning a future together. Ricardo called her mi amor and mi vida. Diane responded with heart emojis and long paragraphs about how trapped she felt in Colorado, how I did not understand her, how I was too focused on my career to notice her needs. She said I was a good man, but not the right man. She said she felt alive with Ricardo in a way she had never felt with me. The messages detailed their plan. Ricardo would help her get certified to work as a nurse in Spain. He had connections at hospitals in Barcelona. He promised her a beautiful life filled with art culture, Mediterranean beaches, and passionate romance. She ate it all up. In one message, she wrote, "I cannot wait to wake up next to you every morning and finally be free." I kept scrolling, feeling sicker with each line. Then, I found the flight confirmation. One-way ticket to Barcelona, departing in 12 days. She had booked it 3 weeks ago. I checked our bank accounts on my phone. She had been withdrawing small amounts of cash over the past 2 months probably, so I would not notice a single large transaction. Altogether, she had taken almost $4,000 from our joint savings. I sat on the kitchen floor surrounded by the life we had built together and realized it had all been a lie. Or at least it had become a lie somewhere along the way, and I had been too trusting to see it. Max came over and rested his head on my lap, sensing my distress. Bella followed, whining softly. Even the dogs knew something was wrong. The rage came later. First, there was just shock and numbness. My wife was leaving me. She had been planning this for months. She was going to vanish to another country, with a man she barely knew, abandoning everything we had worked for, everything we had promised each other. and she was going to do it while I was away on a business trip like a coward, leaving nothing but a goodbye letter like I was some obstacle to be sidestepped. I did not confront her. Every instinct screamed at me to throw the iPad in her face the moment she walked through the door and demand answers. But I realized that confrontation would solve nothing. She had already made her choice. Instead, I decided to protect myself. I took screenshots of every message, every plan, every piece of evidence. I transferred half of our remaining joint savings into my personal account. I contacted a divorce attorney and started the paperwork. I was not going to be a victim in this. If Diane wanted to burn our life down, fine. But I was going to make sure I did not get buried in the ashes. I also started researching Ricardo. It took less than an hour to find his social media profiles. His Facebook page was public, filled with photos of himself at fancy restaurants on yachts, posing in expensive suits. He looked like someone who spent more time curating an image than actually living a real life. His divorce from his previous wife had been finalized just 1 year earlier. In the comments of his photos, multiple women left flirty messages and heart emojis. This was not a man looking for true love. This was a man who collected women like trophies. I wanted to warn Diane. Part of me still loved her enough to want to protect her from making a catastrophic mistake. But another part of me, the part that was growing stronger with each passing day, knew she would not listen. She was too far gone, too intoxicated by the fantasy Ricardo had sold her. She would have to learn the hard way. 3 days before her flight, I had a business trip scheduled to San Francisco. It was terrible timing, but I could not cancel without raising suspicion. Diane kissed me goodbye that morning, her lips brushing my cheek in a gesture so hollow it made me want to scream. She told me to be safe and that she would miss me. I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of guilt or second thoughts. There was nothing, just a woman counting down the hours until she could start her new life. I activated the GPS tracker on our car through the app on my phone. I had installed it months ago for safety reasons, never thinking I would use it like this. On the second day of my trip, I watched the little dot move from our house to Denver International Airport. She was gone. I cut my meetings short, booked the earliest flight back to Denver, and arrived home by late evening. Walking through the front door felt like stepping into a tomb. The house was silent except for the frantic barking of Max and Bella coming from the laundry room. I opened the door, and they rushed out, jumping on me, desperate for attention. She had locked them in there with enough food and water to last 3 days, like they were just another problem to be managed before her grand escape. I walked through each room. Her closet was empty. Her dresser drawers were cleaned out. Her jewelry, her perfume, her favorite books, the framed photos of us from vacations and anniversaries all gone. It was like she had erased herself from our home, from our life, from me. On the kitchen table under a coffee mug, to keep it from blowing away, was a handwritten letter. I picked it up with trembling hands and read it. The words were brief, cold, impersonal. She apologized, but said she could not live this life anymore. She had found someone who truly understood her, someone who made her feel alive again. She asked me not to try to find her. She needed a fresh start. She hoped I would take good care of Max and Bella. She wished me well. That was it. 7 years of marriage reduced to half a page of emotionless explanations. I crumpled the letter in my fist and sank into a chair. Max and Bella pressed against my legs, whining softly. I buried my face in my hands and let myself cry for the first time since this nightmare began. I cried for the future we would never have. I cried for the trust that had been shattered. I cried for the man. I used to be the man who believed love was enough. But then, through the tears and the pain, something shifted inside me. I realized that Diane leaving was not the end of my story. It was the end of hers. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and I did not need to do anything to make her pay for it. Life would do that for me. The next morning, I called my attorney. We filed for divorce, immediately, citing abandonment. Since Diane had left the country and refused to respond to any legal notices, the divorce was processed in absentia. Within 2 months, it was finalized. I kept the house, the dogs, and most of our shared assets. Diane got nothing because she asked for nothing. She was too busy chasing her fantasy in Spain to care about the legal consequences of what she had done. For the first month after Diane left, I threw myself into work. I took on extra projects, stayed late at the office, and volunteered for every business trip available. Staying busy kept me from thinking too much about the betrayal. But at night alone in our bed with Max and Bella, curled up at my feet, the loneliness crept in. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had ever really known my wife at all. Then about 6 weeks after she vanished, I received an email from a woman named Sophia. The subject line read, "About Ricardo and your wife." My first instinct was to delete it, assuming it was some kind of scam. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Sophia introduced herself as Ricardo's ex-wife. She had seen photos of Diane with Ricardo on social media and felt compelled to reach out. She wrote, "I need to warn you, he is a liar and a manipulator. I spent 5 years married to him, and he destroyed my life piece by piece. Please believe me when I tell you that your wife will regret this." I responded cautiously, asking for more details. Over the next few days, Sophia sent me the full story. Ricardo was not the successful, wealthy cardiologist he pretended to be. Yes, he was a doctor, but he was drowning in debt. The fancy apartment he posted about on social media was rented, and he was often late on payments. He had a gambling problem and owed money to several people. The yachts and expensive dinners were borrowed or paid for with credit cards he had no intention of paying off. His entire life was a carefully constructed illusion. Sophia explained that Ricardo had a pattern. He would meet women, charm them with grand promises, make them feel like they were the center of his universe, and then slowly bleed them dry emotionally and financially. When they finally figured out who he really was, he would move on to the next victim. Sophia had escaped the marriage financially ruined and emotionally scarred. She warned me that Diane was about to experience the same fate. I wanted to feel sympathy for Diane. I wanted to feel some satisfaction at the thought of her realizing what she had done. But mostly I just felt empty. She had made her choice. Whatever happened next was on her. 3 months after Diane left, I received a message from an unknown number. It was from someone claiming to be a friend of Diane who lived in Barcelona. The message was brief but telling. "Your ex-wife is struggling here. She cannot find work. Ricardo is not helping. Thought you should know." I did not respond. What was I supposed to do with that information? She was not my responsibility anymore. By the 5th month, more details started trickling in through mutual acquaintances and social media. Diane had discovered that her American nursing license was not easily transferable to Spain. She needed to complete additional coursework, pass proficiency exams in Spanish, and navigate a bureaucratic nightmare that could take years. She had no income and no safety net. Ricardo, it turned out, was rarely around. He was always busy with work or social obligations, leaving her alone in a country where she barely spoke the language. Then I saw a photo that a mutual friend posted from a trip to Barcelona. In the background of a group shot at a bar, there was Diane. She looked thin, exhausted, and nothing like the vibrant woman who had left Colorado 6 months earlier. Someone in the comments mentioned she was working as a waitress at that very bar. My wife, a dedicated nurse with years of experience, was serving drinks to tourists because she could not practice her profession in the country she had run away to. By the 7th month, Sophia contacted me again. She sent screenshots of messages Diane had sent her begging for help. Apparently, Ricardo had kicked Diane out of his apartment. He was dating someone new, a younger woman he had met at a medical conference. Diane was living in a cramped room in a shared apartment, with 3 other people struggling to pay rent with her waitress salary. She told Sophia she had made a terrible mistake, that she wanted to go home, but did not have the money for a plane ticket. Sophia, to her credit, told Diane she could not help her. Diane had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Then came the email I had been half expecting. 9 months after leaving, Diane reached out to me directly. The message was long, rambling, and soaked in regret. She apologized for everything. She admitted she had been foolish, selfish, and blind. She said Ricardo had lied to her about everything, that the life he promised was a mirage. She was alone, broke, and desperate. She begged me to forgive her, to help her come home, to give her another chance. I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt less and less. No anger, no sadness, just a dull sense of finality. I did not respond. I did not block her either. I simply archived the message and moved on with my day. Diane was not my problem anymore. She had chosen her path. The consequences were hers to bear. Instead of dwelling on her plea, I focused on rebuilding my life. I went to therapy, working through the betrayal with a counselor who helped me understand that Diane's actions were about her own brokenness, not about any failure on my part. I started going to the gym every morning before work, running trails with Max and Bella by my side. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage. I joined a rock climbing club and spent weekends scaling cliffs and breathing fresh mountain air. Work flourished. My focus and dedication paid off, and I was promoted to lead engineer on a major project. The raise that came with it allowed me to finally renovate the house, turning it into a space that felt like mine rather than ours. I painted the walls, bought new furniture, and replaced every piece that carried a memory of Diane. Max and Bella loved the changes, especially the new oversized dog beds I bought them. 6 months after Diane's email, I met Amy. She was a 4th-grade teacher who had joined the climbing club around the same time I did. She had auburn hair that caught the sunlight, freckles across her nose, and a laugh that made everyone around her smile. We started talking after a group climb one Saturday, and I learned she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. Max and Bella adored her from the moment they met. She would sit on the floor of my living room, letting them climb all over her, laughing as they licked her face. Amy knew about my past. I told her everything on our 3rd date, needing her to understand the baggage I carried. She listened without judgment, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The fact that you can still trust enough to tell me that story shows how strong you are," she said. We took things slow. There was no rush. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. Through Sophia, I eventually learned what happened to Diane. After a full year in Spain, she finally scraped together enough money to buy a plane ticket home, borrowing most of it from her parents. She returned to Colorado, defeated, jobless, and alone. Her nursing license had been revoked for abandoning her position without proper notice. She was living with her parents at 35 years old, working part-time at a grocery store, trying to piece together a life from the ruins she had created. Ricardo, meanwhile, continued his pattern. He was dating a model, now posting the same types of photos he had posted when he was with Diane. She had been just another conquest, another woman foolish enough to believe his lies. He had moved on without a second thought, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts and shattered dreams. 2 years after Diane vanished, I stood on the summit of Pikes Peak with Amy by my side. It was the same mountain where I had proposed to Diane almost a decade earlier, but this time, everything was different. The air was crisp and thin, the view stretching endlessly in every direction. Max and Bella, older now, but still energetic, raced around us, tails wagging with pure joy. Amy wrapped her arm around my waist and rested her head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. I looked out at the vast expanse of mountains and valleys, feeling a sense of peace I had not known was possible after everything I had been through. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," I said. "Grateful for the storm that taught me to appreciate the sunshine." Amy smiled and kissed my cheek. We stood there for a while, just breathing in the mountain air, before heading back down the trail. Max and Bella ran ahead, their leashes dragging behind them, completely free and completely happy. I realized I felt the same way. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. For months, I questioned everything about myself, wondering what I had done wrong, how I could have been so blind. But through therapy time and the support of people who genuinely cared about me, I learned that Diane's choices were never about my worth. They were about her own emptiness, her own inability to appreciate what she had. Karma did not need my help. I never sought revenge. I never tried to sabotage her new life or expose Ricardo's lies to her before she discovered them herself. I simply stepped back and let the natural consequences of her actions unfold. And those consequences were devastating. Diane lost her career, her home, her financial stability, her dignity, and ultimately the fantasy she had risked everything to chase. She ended up with nothing but regret. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life into something stronger and more authentic than it had ever been. I learned that trust once broken does not mean you can never trust again. It means you trust more wisely. I learned that love is not about holding on to someone who does not want to be held. It is about finding someone who chooses you every single day, even when things get hard. Amy was that person. She was patient with my healing process, never pushing me faster than I was ready to go. She loved Max and Bella like they were her own. She brought laughter back into my home and reminded me what it felt like to be truly seen and valued. Our relationship was built on honesty, communication, and mutual respect. The foundation was solid because we both knew what it was like to be hurt and chose to build something better together. I forgave Diane not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting what she did or pretending it did not hurt. It meant releasing the anger and resentment that were poisoning my own happiness. She would have to live with her choices for the rest of her life. I did not need to carry that burden with her. As for the lessons I learned, they were hard-earned but invaluable. Trust is sacred, and when someone breaks it, the responsibility lies with them, not with you. Do not waste your energy seeking revenge. Life has a way of balancing the scales without your interference. Focus instead on becoming the best version of yourself. The people who hurt you will face their own consequences. Your job is to heal, grow, and move forward. I also learned that the end of something painful can be the beginning of something beautiful. Losing Diane forced me to confront parts of myself I had ignored to build resilience. I did not know I had to open my heart again, even when it felt impossible. The man I became after the betrayal was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than the man I was before. I would not wish that pain on anyone, but I also would not trade the growth that came from it. Standing on that mountain with Amy watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I understood something profound. Diane thought she was running toward freedom when she left, but real freedom came from letting go of the illusion that another person could complete you. Real freedom came from finding peace within yourself, building a life you loved, and sharing it with someone who truly valued you. As we hiked back down the trail, Amy asked if I ever wondered what Diane was doing now. I thought about it for a moment and realized I genuinely did not care. She was part of my past, a chapter that had closed. My present and my future belonged to me, to Amy, to Max and Bella, to the life I was actively creating every single day. That night we sat on my back porch watching the stars come out one by one. Amy rested her head on my shoulder, and I felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Grateful that I survived the worst betrayal of my life. Grateful that I chose to heal instead of staying bitter. Grateful that I opened my heart to love again. Karma destroyed Diane's life, but not because I willed it or orchestrated it. Karma destroyed her life because she made choices rooted in selfishness, dishonesty, and fantasy. She burned down something real and valuable to chase something fake and hollow. The consequences were inevitable. I just happened to witness them from a safe distance, while building something infinitely better. So here is what I want you to take away from my story. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you ends up being the best thing that could have happened. Not because of karma destroying someone else's life, but because it forced you to rebuild yours into something stronger, truer, and infinitely more beautiful. Betrayal does not have to define you. How you rise from it does. What do you think? Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to something better? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I am always moved by your strength and resilience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that remind us we are not alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey. I wish you healing growth and the courage to rebuild after the storms. Take care of yourselves, and remember the best revenge is a life well lived.